Hey y'all, welcome to Soccer for Us. I'm Bart, and today I am talking about the U.S. Men's National Team Gold Cup roster and Coach Greg Berhalter's approach to building this roster and the tournament as a whole. Now, before we get started talking about the 2021 Gold Cup and the USMNT's path to hopefully bringing home the large trophy, I want to remind you to please subscribe to Soccer Down Here on whatever podcatcher you are listening right now. That means you will get every episode of the daily Soccer Down Here show and every episode of Soccer for Us when it drops. Also, make sure to follow at Soccer for Us Pod on Twitter so that you can share your thoughts with me and you can hear my thoughts in the moment about U.S. soccer news and games. Now, to discuss this U.S. men's national team roster for the 2021 Concacaf Gold Cup, I'm going to bring on an old friend of the show. You've heard him on here before, a man who covers every kind of football and who is the author of Soccer American Style, Sydney Hunt. Now, before we get into the conversation with Sydney, I do have some U.S. soccer news to pass along. The U.S. women's national team is off to Japan after a pair of 4-0 wins over Mexico over the 4th of July weekend. The big headline coming out of this pair of matches is that Tobin Heath not only played in both matches, but scored in both. Now, I'll eat some crow on this, as I was very concerned about Tobin Heath being included in this roster. Her injury situation, not having played in this whole calendar year, I was concerned about bringing her to Tokyo and reserving a spot for her. Other than Vlatko telling us she was good, we hadn't seen her really train. I know there were some videos out, but a video of her running around kicking a ball is not the same as playing in a real competitive match. So I still feel justified in being concerned of her inclusion, but I think it just is another side effect of the COVID reality where we don't have a whole lot of reporters in training, so they're not able to accurately report like, hey, yeah, Tobin trained with the first team fully today. So, had we been able to know that information, probably would have felt better about bringing her. I'm still concerned about her overall fitness for a major international tournament, but seeing her ball out within the Vlatko system and show individual flair is really good for both the team and her as a whole before they head to Tokyo. However, Julie Ertz watched from the stands and still doesn't seem ready for action. However, I'm not as concerned about these two players being on the roster anymore because FIFA and the IOC will allow 22 players to be rostered for the tournament. Now, only 18 can make the matchday roster, but having those 4 alternates who are traveling with the team fully be on the roster means that Vlatko has more flexibility with his roster decisions for the tournament, which means maybe if Julie Ertz isn't ready to go for match 1 or 2 or 3 even, that's okay because now you can include someone else on the roster. And that person for this set of matches was Katarina Macario, who we saw on both matchday rosters and who played in the match on Monday. So that's the USWNT's kind of status right now, off to Tokyo after 2 wins over Mexico, and still wondering where Julie Ertz is. But I think the 22-player roster is much better for both in men's and women's tournaments at the Olympics. I think that they should stick with that going forward. On the U.S. men's national team front, the USMNT will play Canada in Nashville, Tennessee on Sunday, September 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 local. This will be the first home match of the Octagon and the second of the campaign. Nashville will be the home for the U.S. men's national team during this camp. They have not played in Nashville since the 2019 Gold Cup. Nashville has been getting a lot of games since their soccer team was announced, and a little bit before that, honestly. It's a pretty decent spot for U.S. teams to play in. And I know the women played there in 2019 as well, and the men played there. The last time I went there for a men's match was the 2017 Gold Cup. So hopefully the Nashville faithful, Nashville SC fans from Memphis, from Chattanooga, from Knoxville, even, Tennessee, greater, you've got Birmingham close by, all of Kentucky, and I know personally I and some friends from Atlanta will be up there. So hopefully we have a really large crowd on hand in Nashville to welcome the Canadians on Sunday, September 5th, as we look to capitalize on what is kind of a weak opening window for World Cup qualifying. Now that we have the news wrapped up, I'm going to bring on Sydney Hunt and talk to him about this roster that Greg Berhalter and the U.S. men's national team dropped last week. Stick around. Well, I am really pleased to bring back on Soccer for Us, a man who knows a lot about every type of football and who makes it his job to make sure everyone is informed about things going on with U.S. soccer and Atlanta United. I am proud to welcome Sydney Hunt onto the podcast again. Sydney, how are you today?
Hey, Bart, doing well. Thanks for having me again.
So you started a newsletter for U.S. Soccer, Soccer American Style, and you have done a really good job, at least for me, of keeping me in the loop on news and information about U.S. Soccer. But today I'm going to ask you to give some maybe thoughts on some things, not just reporting, but maybe some analysis. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thanks for your kind words. Good to know at least one person's reading it. But yeah, but in all seriousness, we're starting out, not starting out, but we're getting some ground, so that's good to hear. So definitely, if you're listening, subscribe to Soccer American Style.
Yeah, please do, because like I said, it's a good way to get a very quick recap of all the things that have all the news that has gone on in U.S. soccer. All right, Sydney. So the big news right now, obviously, is that the U.S. men's national team is playing in the 2021 Concacaf Gold Cup, and we have a roster. It is fully complete. There are 23 players that have been selected by head coach Greg Berhalter to play in this tournament. Very first question I have for you before we even get into the positions or players, but what do you think Berhalter is using this Gold Cup tournament for?
Yeah, so right off the top, what he said in his media availability the other day is, look, he doesn't want to look at this as an experimental roster, but he feels that this is a roster that can win the Gold Cup. So right off the bat, he's showing a lot of confidence in the team. Granted, it's a bit young. It's missing some of the headline players from Europe overseas, and that's understandable. Obviously, there are a few European players that are on the team right now. But the main thing is there are a lot of youngsters, some players from the U23 team, and some other young players that haven't really broken into the United States radar, but are looking to. So I think he's trying to do one of two things. One, he's trying to obviously evaluate talent to see who can contribute on a greater level on the senior side. And number two is trying to build depth. One position in particular he was talking about was center back. Miles Robinson, Walker Zimmerman, we'll talk about them later. They are set to be the starters in the Gold Cup, but that there is not a lot of depth at center back, as he was saying. So I think some areas of depth that need to be addressed. Center back, I would say midfield as well, maybe the wings. Well, that's sort of his reasoning with this roster, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, again, to kind of remind everyone, yes, we have World Cup qualifying coming up. You will be playing, for the most part, 3 matches in 6 days. And I guess the way to best describe it is you only have to choose 23 players for a match day roster, right? Like there's no limit on how many players that can travel or train. You just have to have the 23 for the match day roster, correct?
Yeah, just 23. And obviously with COVID to some extent, and we saw it with the women, that kind of was expanded. It was 18 for the women, it expanded to 22, but
Right.
23 is the case for the Gold Cup. It has been, I believe, for some time. So
Right.
it's, like I said, it's a young group of players, but there are some veterans in there that have been in international competition for years, so they know their way around. And not only can they contribute, but they can show some of the younger players how it's done and really take them under their wing during this tournament.
Yeah, no, I guess adding players, if you will, from as we've been able to see in previous tournaments. But
Right.
23 guys, let's break it down. We'll start at the top or at the back, really, with goalkeepers. You have Brad Guzan from Atlanta United, Sean Johnson from New York City FC, and Matt Turner from New England. Now, you're an Atlanta United fan. I'm an Atlanta United fan. You cover Atlanta United for Dirty South Soccer. I think we all are questioning why Berhalter called up Brad Guzan, because to me, the obvious number one is Matt Turner, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. Matt Turner will be the number one goalkeeper in the Gold Cup. And the thing with Matt Turner, and I'll kind of touch on what Berhalter said about Turner first before getting to Kazan, is Turner. Berhalter was really impressed with how Turner has begun the MLS season. You see it with the Revolution at the top of the Eastern Conference table in MLS. But one of the things he mentioned is, he hasn't had an international experience where you have Guzan and Sean Johnson who have. So,
Right.
as Atlanta United fans, Guzan is kind of the least of Atlanta United's worries at this point. But
I don't know. You ask the right fans. I think he needs to be kicked out of the team right now. But, hey.
Yeah, depending on who you ask, you're right. But the thing with Guzan and Johnson to that extent is, they know their way around. Like I said, they've played internationally, where Matt Turner only has the one cap against Trinidad, and that was a 7-0 rout of Trinidad. So Berhalter made the point that, it's one thing to do it in MLS. It's another thing to do it on the international level, especially on a tournament, in the tournament where the stakes are much higher and the margin of error is that much thinner. And you mentioned, too, it's very compressed. And like I said, that margin of error just goes away. You lose one match and it won't kill you, but it will still cause some difficulty with you moving forward in the tournament. So, Turner is the number one, but Guzan and Johnson certainly provide those experienced hands at the back behind them to kind of show them the ropes and lead them on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal, or at least my hope, is that Matt Turner establishes himself as, a very legitimate possibility to play for the U.S. men's national team. Like you said, he only has one cap. It was for Trinidad and Tobago. He did get that penalty kick save in that match, but other than that, that match was just not a great test for a goalkeeper, to be quite honest. So, yes, Haiti and Martinique aren't great teams, but they should be a little bit better than a Trinidad team that had, nobody who was able to play at that point in time.
No, exactly. And we'll touch on the group probably a little later, but, it's a very, very straightforward group. You mentioned Haiti, you mentioned Martinique, you mentioned Canada. And, it's a very low-risk situation for him as the group stage is concerned. Of course, when you get to the knockout stages, the difficulty becomes that much greater because you have the possibility, I believe, of maybe a Jamaica in the quarterfinals or Panama or some of those middle of the table Concacaf side. So it's a very low risk. The Gold Cup, I don't think that he'll be tested all that much. He shouldn't be tested all that much.
Right.
But very, very good situation for him to take his opportunity and show, like he said, that he belongs to the national team goalkeeper roster. As on a greater scale, it looks like that number one spot is already set with Zach Steffen, but Turner, who obviously has a great story coming from a trialist with the Revs to now a national team goalkeeper, is pretty impressive. But I think he'll take this latest opportunity well.
Yeah, so moving on from the goalkeepers, I think it's a pretty straightforward. I'm a little, I think Tim Melia got snubbed a little bit just because, he's a Kansas City guy. All three of these matches will be played in Kansas. All three of the group matches will be in Kansas City. I feel like that would have been a no-duh call-up, but, hey, Brad Guzan is there and Sean Johnson is there. So I think it's a pretty solid group of goalkeepers. Defenders, I think, are the most exciting, but also the most solid. I think that this core group of players should provide some stability for the U.S. You have George Bello from Atlanta United, Reggie Cannon from Boa Vista, Shaq Moore from Tenerife, Donovan Pines from DC United, Miles Robinson from Atlanta United, James Sands from New York City FC, Sam Vines from Colorado, and Walker Zimmerman from Nashville. So, like I said, pretty strong group. And I know you said that Berhalter really does see Miles Robinson and Walker Zimmerman as his two starters. And I think, again, to touch on what you said, that Berhalter, relaying Berhalter's thoughts, he thinks that there's a little bit of, not a lot of depth at center back. I disagree. I think we have a lot of center backs. I think the problem is we just don't have a solidified depth chart, if that makes sense. I think that there are like 10 guys who can play center back. It's just a matter of where they fit and how. What do you think Berhalter is looking for from Miles and Walker in this tournament?
Yeah, I think he's looking for, like you said, kind of to establish that pecking order in the center back rotation. Obviously, Aaron Long is the number one center back for this program. Of course, he's dealt with injury, that horrific ACL injury that's held him out. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like he'll be able to be in the Gold Cup, certainly Gold Cup, but not the World Cup qualifying, at least for the foreseeable future. So
Yeah,
obviously a big
he's
blow.
out.
Yeah, obviously a big blow, not just to the Red Bulls, but to the U.S. national team. So we know what he can do. He's the first one on the team sheet when he's healthy. When it comes to, like you said, that pecking order in the center back rotation, well, I'll start with Zimmerman because Zimmerman is a player that we know more about than Robinson to some extent. He does have the national team experience that Robinson does not. He's done well for his club, Nashville SC.
Yes.
On the other hand, look at Robinson is a player who has done very well with Atlanta United, established himself as one of the top center backs in the league, bar none, during his time with the club. Let's hope that he continues the form that he's just demonstrated with his club at club level in the Gold Cup because we talked about that pecking order. Should he perform well, should he take his opportunities in the Gold Cup, that builds well for him in the future. So not as a starter in the World Cup or anything like that, but he moves up the pecking order for sure with a good performance. So I'll be mainly watching him. Zimmerman, of course, I'll be watching him as well, but we know a little bit about what we get from him. But I think the biggest spotlight will be on Robinson because he's
absolutely
a quote-unquote newer face in that rotation.
Yeah, Zimmerman has the 14 caps for the national team. Miles has only had 3, and most, right. One of those came in 2019, but 2 of those coming, 2 of those coming in 2019, one coming in against that Trinidad team that we talked about. So to your point, like there's more to learn about Miles on the national team level, and he has become, I think, even a better player since we saw him in January. I think he's improved a lot. Whereas I don't think Walker Zimmerman has. I think he's a very good player. Don't get me wrong. He's obviously MLS Defender of the Year winner for a reason. But it's not about evolving as a player for him, whereas Miles is continuing to evolve and learn, who he is as a player. So interesting to see how Miles can continue that growth in the Gold Cup.
Yeah, and not only for his personal growth, but he's starting to learn the systems of Berhalter. Berhalter's been very clear about the role he wants certain backs to play. So it's a little bit different than with Gabriel Hunte with Atlanta United. Or there are some similarities, I would say, but it's a little bit different with Greg, the role that Miles will play and Walker will play and Aaron will play when he gets healthy.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of Miles getting used to that, getting used to the tactics, getting used to this role, not just as a defender, but as a distributor out of the back, really. That's what Berhalter has kind of looked to establish for his center backs as distributors of the ball, passing the ball at field to start attacks. So we'll see hopefully more of that. We'll see Miles hopefully grow into that and get a hold of the tactics that Berhalter wants to employ in this club or this team.
Yeah, I think that you're looking obviously at those two playing the bulk of the minutes. I don't know if Donovan Pines or James Sands will get a chance. I do think that both of those are interesting guys who I'm glad are in camp to continue to learn, as you said, Berhalter's system and understand what's expected of them. I don't know if they're necessarily in the mix for the World Cup qualifying cycle, but again, having guys who are accustomed to the system is going to be important when World Cup qualifying comes because injuries can happen. Players may have to be out because of club stuff. Who knows?
Sure.
With the compacted schedule, someone may pick up. I know a lot of times you have, a club saying, oh, he's got a knock or a little bit of a hamstring pull, but this season will still be a very compressed club schedule, and those little nagging injuries may hold some players back. So having a good pool of players to be able to call from is going to be a benefit for Berhalter. So center backs, again, I think pretty settled. Right back, I think, is also very settled. You've got Reggie Cannon from Boavista, and you've got Shaq Moore from Tenerife. Shaq Moore has, been a part of U.S. men's national team program for a while through the youth ranks and even some at the, the senior level. But I think Reggie Cannon is obviously the starting right back. But good for Shaq Moore to get into this camp because I think it's nice to have, again, another right back option. I don't know if that's an area of need, but what do you make of Reggie and Shaq being battling it out for the right back spot here?
Yeah, like you say, I think Reggie, the option at right back. I think Shaq, and I'll admit I haven't seen too much of Shaq. Obviously, paying for a Segunda División team in Spain, so his exposure to, I guess, the everyday fan hasn't been as much as, say, a Cannon or a James Sant or Moss Robinson or Zimmerman. So I'm glad, like you said, he's had some time with the national team in camp. I'm glad that he's able to get himself to a point where that he can at least train with this roster. But again, I think Cannon is the number one option for sure at right back. But like you said, with the compressed schedule, with potential knocks to players, injuries, things like that, it'll be good to, again, make sure that you have plenty of players in the right back pool that can step in when needed. So I don't know if Moore will play too much, but I think, again, having him there to train and at least get to know the tactics of Berhalter will be a benefit for him. But again, I think it's Cannon all the way at right back.
Yeah, I mean, Shaq Moore last appeared for the U.S. in 2018 during that like kind of gap year that we had. But I think he's definitely a guy who, if you put him in against Haiti or Martinique, I'm not worried. And I think that, Martinique might be the game where you see a good run out of him. Similar to the left back situation, you've got Sam Vines and George Bello. Now, Vines has been a pretty established fixture in the Greg Berhalter camps. He has played a good bit for Berhalter during the past really year and a half. Sam Vines with 3 caps, and has also been he was a part of that Olympic qualifying failure down in Guadalajara in March. George Bello got his first cap against Trinidad in January. So 2 young guys, Bello a little bit younger than Vines, but both MLS guys, very young. And I think both, you could say, have aspirations to go to Europe, right? Bello has obviously been linked to some rumors. I think Vines has had rumors attached to his name. None of them seem super legit, but where do you see the Bello and Vines kind of stacking up against each other for this tournament?
Yeah, I think with Bello, let's start with him right off the bat because we've seen more of him here in Atlanta than the Vines. And the thing with Bello is there's no question his talent. He's had a really good season. I think he's really had an opportunity to show what he can do under Hunte with Atlanta United. But the thing with him is injuries. Injuries have dogged him throughout his young career. So one of the things that I was looking at, I'm sure you were looking at when Atlanta United played Chicago Fire up in Chicago a few days back. He took a knock, he went down and had to be taken off later in the match. And we're all thinking, what else can go wrong with Atlanta United down to the match already and on the way to another loss? But Bello, unfortunately, injuries have been a part of his career. Hopefully this is the year where he finally stays healthy and he establishes himself as a player that can contribute, maybe not to a major European club, but maybe a mid-table Italian, Spain club or something like that. So I think the Gold Cup is a great opportunity for him to showcase his talents as well as the rest of this club season for him. As far as Gold Cup, I think Vines has the edge just based on, again, you don't know too much about Bell at the national level, but again, due to this injuries. That being said, depending on how things go in camp, training, that will really that'll really inform Berhalter's decision as to where he'll go at left back. But again, I think Vines has a slight edge at this current point in time.
Yeah.
You could see Bello get a start or two, depending on how things go. Maybe in the Martinique, where it's a lesser opponent, or United States are expected to win pretty handily. But again, I think Vines has the edge just because, again, we know a little bit more about him. He's been, for the most part, more healthy than Bello at this point in time. So that's how I see it, at least for now.
Yeah, I agree. And I put that out on Twitter that, I think Vines is ahead of Bello on the depth chart, and that obviously sparked some outrage. And I'm like, y'all, depth chart versus who's a better player doesn't exactly equate to the same thing, because Sam Vines is right now higher on the depth chart because, to everything you said, he's been playing more for Berhalter. He's been a part of U.S. camps under Berhalter more. He, again, went down to the Olympic qualifying, which I know wasn't necessarily Berhalter, but the system. He's been in the system. I also think that he's performed pretty okay at the senior international level. I've been really impressed with his passing down the line from that left back position. I think Bello does a lot of good things as well, and I think that you could. I think both of these players have a lot to gain because the left back position for the U.S. is one that doesn't have a lot of answers, and I think both of these guys are playing to possibly be at least the second left back in the pool come World Cup qualifying.
No, I agree. I definitely agree, and I think that's makes a much more significant opportunity because you want to make sure that you have plenty of depth at left back because again, we go back to that schedule, possible injuries, knocks, things of that nature. So you want to have that number two option in place, and I think it's important to note that this is more than just the Gold Cup. This is more than just winning the Gold Cup, performing well in the Gold Cup. This is with an eye toward, we were kind of talking about it earlier, identifying players that can really contribute in World Cup qualifying. I think left back will be very key. Again, I'm excited to see both of these guys play. We talked about Vines being part of the U23s, and unfortunately things didn't work out there. But I'm really excited to see Vines, especially Bella at this level. I think this is again, big opportunity for Bella, not just from a club level, not just for a domestic level, but yeah, really an international level.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I hope both of these guys ball out and get moves to Europe in the
Right.
winter transfer window. I mean, honestly, let's hope that happens for both Vines and Bello. Moving to the midfield, I think this is the one position group that I'm like the most meh about because I don't think there's any bad players, maybe like one that I have an issue with. But I think the problem that I have is that it's just not very exciting. And the two exciting players in this group, I don't think we'll see much. So midfield, you have Kellen Acosta from Colorado, Gianluca Busio from Sporting Kansas City, Sebastian Lletget from LA Galaxy, Christian Roldan at Seattle Sounders, Eric Williamson from Portland, and Jackson Ewell from San Jose. Now, three of those guys, Acosta, Lletget, Ewell, are holdovers from the Nations League camp, and they're actually the only three who played during Nations League who are on this roster. The other one, Daryl DK, trained but never actually played during Nations League. And I think I'm going to just say this. This is my issue with Berhalter. I get that he needs some seniority and continuation so that there's not just a bunch of guys who don't know anything about the system. But these three guys, especially Ewell, I don't need to learn anything. And honestly, Lletget, nothing against him. I think he's been quite fine for Berhalter. I don't need to learn anything more about Sebastian Lletget. I know who he is and what he is. And honestly, I think it's a little bit of a disservice to him to keep playing him so much. I mean, get the guy a break. Damn, he's been in like every camp you've called up for the past, since you got here, Greg. I mean, I don't know. Lletget, fine. I'm not mad that he's on the roster. I just wish that we could find someone else to play there because I think that we know what Lletget is. I think for Acosta, I'm okay with it because I do believe he needs more reps at this sixth position for Berhalter because I think looking at the chart now, he's probably the backup to Tyler Adams. The one I'm most concerned with is Jackson Ewell, who has not really proven himself to be that effective against really good competition since he appeared against Uruguay in 2019. And it's been a long time since then. He looked the best player in the U23 group down in Guadalajara, but that's not saying much when you're the best player on a team that failed to make the Olympics. And he really didn't look good in that game against Honduras. And a lot of the problems he had in the Olympic tournament showed up again against Honduras in Nations League. And we just can't have that. A guy who's so easily removed from a game by one very simple tactical adjustment. And so I'm concerned that Berhalter is relying on Jackson Ewell for reasons that don't make sense because surely there's another guy somewhere who has a U.S. citizenship or passport who can do what Jackson Ewell does, maybe better. I don't know. That's just my take on those three guys.
Sure. I think from a larger midfield standpoint, especially attacking midfielder, I think we have to mention Caden Clark, which unfortunately the timing of his appendectomy could have come at a worse time. because I think if he weren't undergoing that, I think he'd be maybe on
I
this
do too.
roster.
I do too.
So unfortunately, bad timing for him, unlucky timing. But a player that has really played well for New York Red Bull since his debut late last year and is being rewarded with a move to Leipzig to play under Jesse March in Bundesliga. So that's a great move for him. I'm looking forward to see what he does overseas. But yes, I think looking at those three players that you just mentioned, right? I think it's a matter of familiarity, especially without Tyler Adams in the lineup at this point
Yeah.
in time. It's a matter of familiarity, sticking to guys especially with the younger players like Williamson and Busio, who we'll talk about Busio in a little bit, I'm sure. But I think, again, familiarity, guys guys you're used to, bringing them into camp and bringing them on the Gold Cup roster to kind of be that guiding force for the younger midfielders. I mean, obviously keep in mind, the flag that Yule's taken in. But yeah, like it's a familiarity, I think is key for him. I think that was what Berhalter's motivation was to bring those guys in.
Yeah, again, we have Busio, we have Williamson, two guys who were kind of snubbed from the Olympic qualifying roster. I know Berhalter mentioned them both in the press conference. Do you think that we'll actually see Busio play significant minutes in this tournament?
I think he will play. I don't know. I think significant minutes is a good question. I don't know if it'll be significant, but I think he will see some time. We mentioned that Martinique match, that possible rotational match, because it's very possible that if the United States win that match, if they beat Haiti, they'll be in the knockout stage automatically. They'll have won the group. So it's a very real possibility of that. So you can maybe rotate players, try some new guys out. I think Busio will be one of those players. Berhalter mentioned specifically that we'll see him play. As far as how much time he'll play, same with Gas, and we'll see what happens. But I'm looking forward to seeing him. He's done well with Sporting Kansas City. He'll obviously get a warm welcome from the hometown crowd at Jonas Mercy Park. So looking forward to seeing how he does. And I think it's a good addition to the roster.
That's true. The last guy I do want to mention is Christian Roldan. He's had a great season for Seattle. He really has. But we have to see him at another Gold Cup and on another U.S. men's national team roster. And I hope he proves me wrong. I genuinely do. But I just I've never seen a Christian Roldan performance for the national team and thought, yeah, we need him.
Yeah, and he's done well for the club. At the club level, I think
he's always done well for Seattle.
Yeah, exactly. And Seattle are, fourth in MLS. So I don't really have a lot of complaints about Roldan, but I think again it speaks to familiarity. It's a guy that Berhalter's used to. So I think it's a situation where maybe there are a couple of players that you couldn't bring in, like a Clark or somebody like that, even though being a younger player. But I think again familiarity was Berhalter's motivation in bringing Roldan in. So I'm not upset about seeing him. Hopefully he does take a step forward on the national level and shows the form that he's shown with Seattle. But yeah, not too upset about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, look, he is a very consistent player. He has a very consistent floor. I just don't think his ceiling is that high, and that's how I feel about that. So, a guy like Cole Bassett or a guy like Keaton Parks are two players who I think I would have rather seen in this, especially Keaton Parks, I would have rather seen in this midfield group than, guys who are all over the, pretty, I don't want to say old, but they're aging players who are not going to develop and grow in their game. Let's just put it that way. That's my issue with the midfield. But anyway, moving on from the midfield, forward line, Paul Arriola from DC United, Daryl DK from Orlando City, Nico Gioacchini from Cannes in France, Matthew Hoppe from Schalke. That's not easy to say. In Germany, Jonathan Lewis from Colorado and Giassi Zardes from Columbus Crew. Now, Jonathan Lewis is the one player in this group I think everyone's really confused about because he hasn't really played much for Colorado. He hasn't started many games. But other than Lewis, I think this group of players is pretty darn good.
Yeah, really, really excited to see Hoppy, who had a terrific season with Schalke, and of course DK, who's balled out for Orlando City, and then Barnsley on the loan spell. Uh,
Yeah,
it brings up the debate whether Orlando City should have sold him or not, and I think
they should
really there's
sell
no
him
debate.
immediately. They should
There's really
sell
no
him
debate.
by.
Exactly.
They should sell him before July 30th. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, absolutely. He's not long for Europe for sure, but I'm really excited to see those two play. You don't know too much about them at a national level because DK, of course, was on the National League or Nations League roster. Hoppy is a little bit of a unknown quantity from a national team
Hmm.
standpoint, and as you know, great form with the club doesn't always equate to great form on an international level. So that's going to be a big question. But I'm really excited to see both of them. I think DK will see some time, more time than Hoppy. I think Hoppy will see a little time as well, not nearly as much as DK, but I think he will see some time. And yeah, we'll see where things go with them. I think especially
Hmm.
DK as even though you have Zardes as a striker and some other people as striker, I think DK has a chance to really establish himself as a national level striker, starting with the Gold Cup.
Yeah, I wrote for Soccer Down Here at the beginning of the year, kind of like resolutions for Berhalter and the U.S. men's national team for this year, and one of them I said is find a striker and stick with it. I don't think we've necessarily found a striker. I think that we have stuck with Josh Sargent for the most part, and I'm okay with that because no one else has really shown that they can do otherwise. But Daryl DK might be the one guy who can kind of take this Gold Cup and take this opportunity to prove that he can be a very legit contender for that starting striker spot once World Cup qualifiers start in September.
Yeah, I would think so. Berhalter mentioned that he had monitoring DK in college as early as his days in college with Virginia. And one of the things that he does say is that DK was a rough player, so there's some edges in his game, rough edges in his game that need to be ironed out or sanded out. So I think with DK, huge opportunity for him in the Gold Cup to establish that he can contribute on a national level.
Yeah.
Yeah, on national team level, like we said with Hoppy, good form with club does always equate to good form with international level. So I'm hoping that's not the case with DK. I'm hoping that the form he showed with Orlando and Burnley or Barnsley during his loan
One of
spell
those B
transfers
teams
over.
in
Yeah, exactly. But I'm hoping that his form with his clubs transfers over to the national level because this is his first real opportunity at the international stage, and let's hope that he makes the most of it.
Yeah, I think this is DK's tournament to shine, and we really hope he does. The one concern I do have with this forward group, I think it's actually pretty strong. I think all of these guys are, other than Lewis, are pretty effective, and I hope to see good things from them. But we only have two wingers. It's Areola and Lewis. We don't have any guys behind them that are true wingers. We have four center forwards, four strikers. What is Berhalter's plan for that?
Yeah, he mentioned that he'll play. Um, he did acknowledge, the depth on the wings and not talking about not having really true wingers, so to speak, on this particular roster. But he did mention that he'll play Hoppy and Liz at left, Ariel and Giacchini at right. Giacchini, another player that young, who it's like he worked his
Hmm.
way firmly into the national team roster. Again, I haven't seen too much of him, especially with him playing in Cannes in France. So let's hope that a kid like him can make the most of his opportunities. Don't know how much time he'll get. Ariel is the number one unquestioned
Yeah.
starter right wing during this tournament for sure. So I don't know how much time you'll see of Nico there. He's done some good things from what I've seen on the national level. Again, haven't seen too much of him domestically, but let's see what happens here in this Gold Cup. This is again another not to the extent of being a big opportunity like it would be for DK, but it's an opportunity for him to work his way again into the roster and show that he deserves a closer look or more looks at international play.
Yeah, and I think to go back to where we started at the beginning, the goals for this tournament are, I think, obviously the goal is to win. You're the United States. Your goal should at least be to get to the final of every Gold Cup tournament you play in, unless
Yeah.
Jurgen Klinsmann is coaching you, then apparently it's okay. But that's still that goal and this roster are still there. But I think that there are some other goals, maybe ulterior goals, if you will, to expand the player pool ahead of World Cup qualifying,
Sure.
get new guys into the system and playing together, and for Berhalter to get information on them again before World Cup qualifying comes around. Is that, I mean, I think you can do both at the same time, right?
Yeah, you absolutely can. It's not like you can have one without the other. And Berhalter again said he doesn't want to look at this as an experimental squad. But I think
I mean, it
in
is.
some, yeah, I was gonna say I think in some form and fashion that is because you have a lot of young players, Pines and Sands, who you brought in, Giacchini, other younger players that you've brought in to see, like, we were talking about, where are they in the pecking order? Where are they in the player pool? So I think, yeah, again, um, there is, bound to be a little bit of experimentation, not like all over the place, but you will see some faces one night and maybe a few new
Mhm.
faces the next, especially against Martinique, which we've talked about, maybe that rotational match where you should win no matter who you put on the field. The gulf is that wide between the two sides. But yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it. Let's see what players can make the most of their opportunities and move their way into the pool, move their way up into the pecking order.
So my question is, a lot of people have said, like, they're concerned because, like, apparently Mexico and Canada are bringing, quote, their A rosters, which isn't exactly true. They're not all, but neither of those are at full strength. Um, but then the concern is, oh well, we're not even bringing, our roster. We're not, where would you grade this roster, if you will?
Yeah, I would say a B minus. It obviously isn't like you said the A roster. There's no Sargent, Pulisic, Adams, what have you on this roster. So it was never going to be that way, especially with a guy like Pulisic, a guy like Stefan, who had just
Right.
come off Champions League, a very long season with their clubs in England with Chelsea and Man City. But yeah, it still is a good roster. It's not, you're not looking at a bunch of Galacticos or a star-studded roster, but there are some veteran players, there are some very green players, and then there are some who are still young but have had some national team experience. So I would say B minus. It's a group that I think is good enough to make the final at absolute worst. They'll win the group stage easily. They'll win their
Oh,
group
okay.
easily. But but I think at the end of the day, this is a team that at worst, if they don't make the final, I mean, you're asking some serious questions of Greg Berhalter.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm looking at is I think that this group is good enough to at least make the final. Obviously, in a knockout tournament, things can happen, but
Sure.
Berhalter is under some pressure to prove that his system really is the thing that will make this group of players better. Because up till now, the system hasn't really shown to be the uh, the thing he wants it to be. This thing that will somehow make the U.S. a much better program. We've still relied on individual talent. So I'm hoping that we see the system be the star a little bit more in this tournament. All right, Sydney. I heard that prediction snuck in there. Let's go through the schedule and talk about where we think the U.S. can finish in this group. So all of these matches are in Kansas City. We start against Haiti on Sunday, July 11th at 8:30 p.m. Then Thursday, July 15th at 9:30 p.m. against Martinique, and Sunday, July 18th at 5 p.m. against Canada. Now, both Haiti and Canada were part of the playoff round of World Cup qualifying. Canada bested Haiti in
Mm-hmm.
their two-legged playoff to qualify for the octagonal, the octagon, the final eight, whatever you're calling it.
Sure.
Martinique is a non-FIFA country technically, so they're not playing in World Cup qualifying. So the U.S. has some teams who I think are legitimately, you can say, are not in the first tier of CONCACAF teams. Um, and I think you have one that is maybe in that second tier. So where do you think this team finishes in the group?
Yeah, Canada, obviously being that team where the gulf is still wide between the U.S. and Canada, not as wide as it's been, but I think that gap is shrinking just a little bit. They have some very strong talent of their own that they're bringing in. Some of those faces won't be in the Gold Cup though, but still some players. One in particular, Alphonso Davies, will be playing in the Gold Cup, so he'll be there. But still, I think the United States shouldn't have too much problems with them. We'll start with Haiti. Obviously, Haiti, the first match, and they should beat Haiti. Martinique, I'm thinking back to 2017, 3-2, whenever
Yeah,
Martinique,
they're not
that
the
should have
same
been.
team there.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, yeah, that's definitely a match that should be a win by any stretch of the imagination. And then Canada, even though, like I mentioned, the gap has closed just a bit, I still think that Canada still have some catching up to do for the United States, or with the United States. So, I mean, I it'd be a disappointment to see them finish second in this group, especially
Well, if you
considering the
finish
teams
second
that
in
are
the group,
in
you got to
it.
play Mexico with the knockout.
Exactly,
So,
exactly. And we're hoping that the next time we see Mexico is in the final on
yeah.
August 1st in Vegas. But yeah, I mean that's a group stage, and like I said, you get to the group stage as the group winner, or knockout stage as a group winner, and you possibility you're facing either Costa Rica or Jamaica. Probably the two most likely teams. We'll see what happens, but yeah, it should set up to be that way. But yeah, I mean, group stage should be relatively straightforward. But again, as you mentioned, anything can happen in the knockout stages. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well, Sydney, I appreciate your insight in this and into this team and the squad, Berhalter's thoughts, and the tournament as a whole. Where can we follow you to make sure we are up to date on all of our U.S. soccer news and analysis during this very busy month for U.S. soccer fans?
Yeah, so go to socceramericanstyle.us. So that's the website where you can find everything that we're doing. You mentioned the newsletter. There's a link to the newsletter there. Looking to do some big things with the newsletter coming soon. Hopefully, I should be able to announce, relatively soon. Still working on some things. But the newsletters, they're just breaking news from the U.S. men's and women's national team. American soccer will cover that as well. On Twitter, you can find us at Soccer Am Style, Soccer AM Style, and then my personal Twitter account is SH Rights.
Well, Sydney, again, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Soccer for Us. I look forward to talking with you more and keeping up with you as this month draws on.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Well, thank you again to Sydney Hunt for joining me on this episode of Soccer for Us to kind of react to the roster, kind of make sense of it, and also think about why Berhalter picked some players that he picked. I'm still a little bit, concerned about some of the wingers he brought, mainly because some of them aren't necessarily wingers, but I'm excited for this group of 23 guys to get a chance to show that they still belong, or that they do belong, in the U.S. men's national team player pool. Again, don't forget to subscribe to Soccer Down Here on whatever podcatcher you are listening right now. And follow us on Twitter at Soccer4UsPod. Thanks for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.